Welcome to the Rescue, Rebuild, Restore podcast, where we equip church leaders and compassionate Christians to serve the hurting with Spirit-led wisdom. I'm your host, Suzanne Burns, author of the book, Rescue, Rebuild, Restore, Compassion That Works. Together, we're going to explore how to rescue body and soul, rebuild spirit and will, and restore lives through the Holy Spirit's power. Because every person deserves to be seen, healed, and loved. Let's dive into today's episode and discover how to live out this calling. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Rescue, Rebuild, Restore podcast. I'm your host, Suzanne Burns. I'm very excited for you to be with me today. I want to talk about the current federal shutdown, what it might be doing to your ministry, to the ministry down the street, and possibly to your donors. As many of you know, unless of course this is your very first episode with me, in which case, welcome. Like, share, subscribe. I would love to have you back again. As many of you already know, I run a nonprofit in Tennessee, and we do not get federal grants, but we do get some state grants that are funded through the federal government. So kind of indirectly, we get federal funds. They just get passed through the state's hands first. And then, of course, we also have donors, individuals, churches, businesses, local family foundations, etc., that support our work. Many of these individuals are affected because of the tariffs, because of prices, because of some of them are government employees, and they may be either on furlough or they may be just waiting for their paychecks, waiting for the government to open as well. But also, many of the nonprofits that I work with are recipients of federal dollars. And for them, this shutdown is far more serious. And of course, it's more serious to the people that they serve as well, right? The big challenge is, how do we protect ourselves from these situations and while still going forward, while still serving, while still meeting needs? We reached a very serious situation with our state grant over the summer, because this, of course, is very new to us, and we are not familiar with all of the processes that are associated with accepting a state grant. For us, what that looked like was we didn't get no money for a couple months. It was quite scary, actually. And we all had to have a very serious come to Jesus moment to recognize that we had too quickly become too dependent on this state grant. And now we're actively working to dig our way out from under that so that it's a benefit, but it's not a requirement for us to stay afloat any longer. And so we have that luxury. And the reason why we have that luxury, and I'm just going to be real with you, is I am really good at holding on. I'm really good at persevering. I'm really good at believing what the Lord said. And my staff are really good at trusting me to be trusting the Lord. They're really good at trusting me to be listening. They're learning to trust the Lord directly. They're learning to listen to Him directly. But I'm their model. Just like a pastor in a church, the congregation follows the pastor follows Christ. Paul said the same thing, follow me as I follow Christ. It's very much the same thing. I serve as the model for the staff, and then that's how they learn. Not that they're not having to also put it into practice for themselves and their own families. But that is a major reason why we have been able to keep going forward all these years. Because by golly, we just keep going forward. I just haven't quit. I haven't given up. I haven't given in. And so that's it. The handful of weeks that we couldn't pay our staff, that we couldn't pay our bills, all I could do was say, I am very sorry, and I will get this caught up as soon as we get our reimbursement, because we don't have anything else. It wasn't pleasant. It was embarrassing. It was difficult. And at the same time, we survived. And we are the better for it because it taught us a lot that we could not have learned any other way. As this current shutdown is occurring now, we recognize that while my ministry, this organization, is not affected directly, at least not yet, many of the people that we work with are. A couple of examples. One donor that I had contacted, we need a septic system installed. It's a long story. We're a residential program. We need a second septic because we have too many people on one, and it's just awful, especially when it rains a lot. I had called one donor in particular that historically has been very faithful to give to specific projects, 3,000, 5,000, 2,000 over the years. Well, he proceeded to tell me that thanks to the tariffs, he has not had an order from his business, which I don't know what he does. It's a big international something or other, and genuinely don't know what he does. I know he spends a lot of time overseas in China and Taiwan and stuff like that, but I don't have any idea what his company actually does. But he said he had not had any orders in over 90 days at all. And he had reached the point where he was having to lay off most of his staff, most of his employees, and in the hopes that he would get an order soon and be able to bring them back. So he, of course, was unable to help us. And that's just one example of people being affected by the shutdown. The changes associated with 2025. I also have some ministry friends here locally, really not necessarily ministry friends, they're more nonprofit friends, which when you get into the nonprofit world, you very quickly find that there are two groups. There are the ministries that are very Jesus-centric and very conservative, and then you have the nonprofits, lean liberal. They lean, I'm not going to finish that sentence. Anyways, you have your nonprofits and you have your ministries in the small town that I live in. And there are quite a few of the liberal nonprofits who are very concerned right now because the majority of their funding is tied up in federal grants. And with the shutdown on October 1st, that's the end of a grant cycle. October 1st is the start of the federal fiscal year. I do not know why. I can't answer that one, unfortunately. It just is. October 1st is when most grants start, and then September 30th is when they complete. At this point, they would be sitting in limbo, waiting to find out if new grants are going to get awarded, if they're going to get reimbursed for what they've paid out for salaries, for client care, etc. It's very, very uncertain for them right now. And of course, their pay is tied to it and all of that. And the interesting thing to me is, because I think that the Lord always does everything very intentionally, even though it may not look like it, well, it usually doesn't look like it on the front end. It looks very frustrating and annoying, and how could I possibly be going through this? How can I possibly survive this on the front end? And then on the back end, you're like, oh, yeah, I learn a lot from the Lord. But typically, the ministries struggle financially fairly consistently. Bless our hearts. We just, it is what it is. The nonprofits, the more liberal, the more government-funded nonprofits don't, because they're government-based and are government funding based. They receive federal grants, and those operate fairly consistently, fairly clockwork, even though there's a lot of hoops, a lot of delay, a lot of just nonsense, just all sorts of nonsense. But there's also consistency, usually. And here they are in the midst of a shutdown where they have very much an inconsistent expectation. Many of them are starting to question whether they're going to stay open, how they're going to continue to serve their people. If they're going to continue to serve their people, they're beginning to limit services. They're beginning to close so many days per week and only be open so many days. And of course, the people that they serve are the ones who suffer, whether that's for food, whether that's for shelter or for financial resources, whatever. The people that they are accustomed to serving, the people who come to them who are accustomed to being served by these organizations are the ones who are suffering, who are bearing the brunt of all of this. Meanwhile, us ministries who regularly struggle for funding, regularly struggle to keep the lights on, keep going forward, we are just continuing to do that. It's not a whole lot has changed. We're actually beginning to see a lot of our local ministries really starting to shine, starting to prove their benefit, their effectiveness, not only to the individuals that they care for, but really to the whole community, because they're still here. They're still showing up. They're still going out into the parks to provide hygiene packs to the homeless, or doing food and meals for the hungry, for the low income. It's very interesting to me how the Lord is beginning to really just separating the wheat from the chaff. And in so many walks of life, but in my walk of life, I see ministries, I see nonprofits, and I see some who are beginning to fold under the pressure, and I see others who are beginning to rise up also under the pressure, but they are rising to the top, and they are kind of thriving in the midst of this. I find that really interesting. And so there's a couple things that I wanted to talk about here on this podcast. First things first, how do we make use of the funds that are available to us in ways that are healthy and sustainable? And how do we avoid getting ourselves trapped into a situation where we have to have this grant, or if this donor doesn't come through, or if this business were to take their donation dollars someplace else, or this church congregation, if they were to decide that they have a different mission now than our mission, then what would we do? How would we fund ourselves? So here's another example that just popped in my mind that may feel a little closer to home for you. So let's say you're a benevolence ministry loosely connected with a local church. Maybe you were originally birthed out of it, but you're still using the same property, and most of your volunteers and all attend that church, but you're not technically like a ministry of the church. You're not a line item budget. And then imagine that one of the high school students in that congregation develops cancer. Instantaneously, in most churches, the focus is going to shift across the board to how do we care for that family? How do we help raise money for their trips to MD Anderson or to Vanderbilt or St. Jude, or et cetera, et cetera? How do we help them afford the medications? Can the church afford to fund their family so that one of their parents doesn't have to work and can stay home with the child? All of these things that are super important, super relevant, and definitely the hands and feet of Jesus, but also that takes away focus and funding from the benevolence work that you're doing. Not that you're in competition, but there really are only so many dollars. There really is just only so much that you can ask of one person or of one congregation. Now, the Lord does own the cattle on 1,000 hills, and that's kind of my point, that it's time to diversify. But that kind of scenario actually happens pretty often to these very small ministries. And then all too often, the leadership of that little ministry is left to think, to try to figure out, to try to discern, is this the timing of the Lord closing? Does this mean that this ministry is no longer relevant? Does this mean that we do need to just diversify and go find funding from different sources? What does this mean for this little ministry? Honestly, depending on the Lord, it can mean all of those things, any of those things, or half a dozen other possibilities as well. The Lord is endlessly creative and endlessly changing. He's always unique. He's the unchanging one, but also he never did the same miracle twice. That's kind of what I'm talking about. No two ministries are truly ever the same, because you're not the same congregation, you're not the same staff, you're not the same community, all of those things. No two ministries are ever truly the same. Therein lies the challenge. What do we do to keep this thing funded in the light of whatever else is going on around us? Whether an entire congregation's focus has instantly shifted, whether our anticipated funding sources have shut down, what are we going to do? And that is a question that you are going to end up having to answer over and over and over again throughout the life of this ministry. So what do we do? Truly, what do we do? In reality, the first things first is the Lord's problem. Funding this ministry, funding this vision he's given you is the Lord's problem. And if he doesn't want it to continue, then you shouldn't want it to continue, right? We want to be where the Lord is, and we want to be where the Lord wants us to be. So if this season has come to an end, then thank you, Lord, for making it clear, and let's move on. And that's definitely my first and foremost encouragement to you. Then second of all, should that not be the case, if in fact the Lord is saying, no, persevere, this is where you start laying fleeces. This is where you start saying, well, Lord, if you want it funded, then you're going to have to give me a plan. You're going to have to tell me who to call. You're going to have to give me favor when I call. You're going to have to do something. You're going to have to open the doors that I need opened, because you know the need better than I do. And I know it pretty good, because, that's my paycheck. Or that's first things first. We have to trust that the Lord has it under control. We may be freaking out, but the Lord never is. He is never scared. He is never surprised. He is never startled or hits unexpectedly. The Lord knows all. And so therefore, he also understands this exact situation. He knows what we need right now. So that's the first thing that we want to hold on to. And then the second thing that we want to hold on to is the work itself. How can we continue to serve these clients to the best of our abilities? What things, what staff need to be released? What maybe programs need to be released? What can we do to cut expenses? I don't ever want to cut expenses or programs merely for the sake of money. But also, I know that there are plenty of things that we do simply because we've been doing them for a long time. And there are plenty of staff members who are here simply because they've grown comfortable. And I know from experience that sometimes you have to be released from a job in order to leave that job. There are certainly people who would never leave unless they were made to leave. And regardless of the fact that the Lord is the one who is trying to get them to leave. What do I mean by that? Here's one story. Years ago, I worked for a company called Checking and Cash. It still exists, like a payday loan company. Awful, horrible, horrible, horrible. But the job I did was in the construction department and in the corporate office. I was ordering carpet samples. I was scheduling work crews. I was responsible for the remodel schedule of the stores and all that kind of stuff. It was a lot of fun. And it was also early in my walk with the Lord. Even though I didn't like the company, I didn't really have the same visceral reaction that I would today if I were to attempt to go work at a company like that. There's absolutely no way that I could. But after I had my second child, I came back from maternity leave to a job that was like a third of the workload that I had been doing previously. And I was bored. I'll just say that. I was bored. It was time for me to go. It was time for me to move on. But I also I had 2 kids at home. I made good money. My husband traveled a good bit, and I needed the consistency. And I could not have left. I didn't have the courage to quit my job. I know that. In hindsight, I know that. And the reason that I know that is because one day I was bored. I was just really, really bored. And so I'm sitting at my desk reading a book. I literally had no work to do. I can't impress upon you enough that I had no work to do. And so I got in trouble, right? I got called into my boss. And he's asking me, well, what about this and what about that and what about this project? And I've done this. I've sent this email. I'm waiting on this information from the leasing department. And I had an answer for everything. I was doing a third of the work that I had been doing previously in the same amount of hours in the day. It was ridiculous. It was so ridiculous. It pissed me off so badly. But I was bored. And so there reached a point in that interview in his office, in my boss's office, where I remember thinking, Lord, you've got to get me out of here. And about that time, my boss reached into the drawer right next to him and pulled out a little pad of pink slips and laid me off. And I cannot tell you how relieved I was, instantaneously how relieved I was. I knew I needed to get out of there. I did not know how to get out of there. And that was an unpleasant place. Imagine how much worse it would be if you loved the place where you worked, right? You love the ministry, you love the people. We see this in churches where people feel called to either to go start a new church, or they're just called across town or something like that. And they grieve. And they don't want to leave because what will my friends think? I'm so deeply rooted here. It's not anybody's fault. And we don't give enough permission for people to just follow the Lord. And I get it. I think that it is a real challenge for us to know exactly how to follow the Lord. He does not make it very clear to us very often. But so that's an example of someone who needs to leave because the Lord says they need to leave, not because we ain't got no money. That is not a sufficient reason for me to lay someone off, just the fact that I don't have enough money. Now, if they choose to leave, that's entirely different. That's on them. But I know that if they're supposed to be here, then we're going to go through this together for a reason. And if you'll stay with me, if you'll dig in, then the Lord will provide. Unless he's saying it's time for you to go. And then maybe you're the reason why we're in this situation because you won't leave otherwise. You're probably wondering, which is it? How do you know? And I can't answer that. Unfortunately, no one can. It's always just kind of in the moment. Think of Gideon. Right? Gideon, he's told that he's this mighty warrior of God, even though he's hiding out, trying to get his work done hiding in the wine press, in the hiding away from the Assyrian army. And he eventually raises this army to go fight. He's got 40 some odd thousand people, and it's just fantastic. And God's, that's too many. I won't get the glory. And so he makes them send a whole bunch of them home. All of them that are scared go on home. Okay, that cuts his army down in half. So now he's, okay, I was 3-1 before, and now 3 bad guys to every one of my army. And now I'm probably 5 or 6-1. So surely now we're good. And God's, no, unfortunately, you've still got too many people because I won't get the glory. And God proceeds to have Gideon cull the army yet one more time. Those who, they all go to the creek to take a drink, and those who've been down to drink water directly from the stream versus those who cup it in their hands and lap it up a dog. The 300-ish that lapped it up a dog, those are the ones that get to stay. Everyone else he sends home. And then, sure enough, Gideon and his 300 win are victorious against the Midianites. Well, sometimes that's just your ministry. Sometimes you've become too bloated in staff and you have people who love being there, who love the work, but aren't necessarily called to the work. And because they're not called, they're not anointed for it. And we have to go through sometimes these great shakings, these trials, to prove out who's actually called because they stay and who's not because they leave. And in good times, there's no reason for them to leave. In good times, they're just content to come in, punch their clock in, metaphorically. I know nobody does clock punching anymore, but to punch in and punch out, doing their job, doing the do, without necessarily the passion that someone else could put in there. But they've been there for so long, or we all love them, or they're a great personality fit, or whatever, or I don't want to hurt their feelings. And yet, if someone's season is over in a particular ministry and they stay, now they're actually in the way. They are in the way of the right person coming in. One thing that I always tried to impress upon my children, and one thing that my mom always impressed on me, was in dating relationships. Lord, help me not get in trouble. If you're dating someone just for the sake of dating them, and you know they are not the right one for you, but you're bored, or then if I'm not dating this person, then I would be alone. I would be lonely. You're also not available. The right person cannot come along because you're in a relationship. And you might not even go to the place where you would otherwise be able to meet this person because you're in this relationship. It's the same thing. If I have a secretary in my office that I know is not doing the great job that I really need it to be, but she's been here for so long, or we all love her, or I don't want to hurt her feelings. Not a bad person. She's so sweet, and she just really loves the clients, and the clients love her, and all of these things that you justify for keeping the status quo. In reality, she's filling a hole that is supposed to be filled by somebody else. And that becomes rebellion. That becomes sin. Anything less than God's perfect will is sin. And so when we start thinking about it like that, sometimes the Lord has to send us these kinds of trials, these kinds of testings, because otherwise nothing else would change. We would be content to leave the status quo because there's no evidence of hand has moved. I'll give you another example real quick. We have a shop in a house here in the county that we live in Bradley County, Tennessee. And then we also, earlier this year, we opened one about 35 minutes up the road in Athens, Tennessee, a second house, maternity home, and a second thrift shop as part of our job training program. Well, we started out really excited, really believing that this is what the Lord wants. My mission is to rescue a generation of them to rescue their own children or whose children will never need rescuing in the first place. That's my mission. That's my assignment from the Lord. So obviously, to me, that would mean, okay, I'm supposed to replicate in multiple areas because these moms are, if I'm going to rescue a generation, that's not just my little community. So earlier this year, we opened the house and the shop, the second set. That's actually what we wrote the state grant to do, to fund that. Well, here we're, 6-8 months in, and the house is mostly empty. It stays empty most of the time. We're just not getting clients that are appropriate fit up there. The staff that we have had, that we've placed up there, all of them have ended up leaving. The thrift shop is just not bringing in the business. Even though it's twice the size of the one we have here in Cleveland, we made $23 last week. We made $23 the whole week. Think about the cost associated with all of that. We are bleeding money from the Athens expansion. And so we're shutting her down, right? If money had not become an issue, we would not have really looked at what the cost was to keep that up and running. I would still be working towards growing and expanding and looking at, okay, where is now the next county that we need to be opening a location in? Where in reality, that was part of the Lord's permissive will. He allowed us to open that location so that we can learn. Praise the Lord. We are not getting donors in the community, even though we're getting pats on the back. Woohoo, okay, that sounds great. We're so happy you're in our town. But we're not getting donors. And we're not getting churches to come on board. We're not finding volunteers. We don't have customers coming in consistently to the shop. And we're not bringing in clients that are a good fit for that house. We are bringing in clients. They just have to stay in the Cleveland house because we don't have the right staff to be up there. And the clients that are coming in are too high need. So they need to be very close to the local staff. We don't have any staff that are in Athens. We are all in Cleveland. Every single one of us to go work in Athens, we have to go drive 35 minutes to go do this. It becomes a burden all too quickly. Clearly, that is not what the Lord wants for us. Had we not gone through the process of not being able to pay our bills and really having to say, okay, where is all of our money actually going and what is happening, so that when the reimbursements did start back up, we could begin to fix the problem. And one big issue is that whole expansion is not what the Lord wants. Otherwise, if it was, he would be blessing it, and he's not. We're leaving. And I absolutely can tell you that we would not be leaving if there were any other answer, because if the Lord hadn't just made it real clear. Because we just opened in March, the thrift shop. The house we opened actually in January, but still, I mean, we haven't even been a full year. And if the money were still consistently coming in, we would not even question it. We would still just be chasing after the clients, and we just different kind of staff, or we just marketing, or we just need to figure out how to get into the university, or we just need to figure out this or figure out that. We would still be striving to make something happen that the Lord doesn't want. For whatever reason, that's on him. That's his decision. He allowed us to go up there so that we could learn. But it's through all of this that I've come to realize the definition of rescuing a generation is not the same as my assumption. And I think I shared this on the last podcast, or maybe I've shared it so many times in the last 2 weeks that I don't even remember it anymore. But what he told me, I was talking with somebody, and the Lord gave me the reminder of Abram and how he was told going to be a father of many nations. Well, this is what I told my friend. I said, my assumption, had I been the one that received that direction, would be, okay, I need to go create a nation, and probably more than one. I'm assuming that since I'm going to be the father of many nations, I need to go find me a nation, or I need to go build me a nation. And that is not what Abram did, though. He followed the Lord, and he left, and he went in obedience and did exactly what the Lord said. But he wasn't out seeking to cause it to happen. Even think about when he and Lot separated, and because sheep, their cattle, all their possessions, their servants, everything was too much for them to keep together. Abram gave Lot the option to pick the direction, and Lot chooses, Sodom and Gomorrah. And of course, we know what happened, but on the front end of that, when they could not have known that was a terrible decision for either of them to have made, had I been the one that was there and I knew that I was supposed to lead nations, or I would assume, if you say I'm going to be the father of many nations, I would assume that I'm going to go be king somewhere, right? Go be the boss of people. I would have thought that I should go towards Sodom and Gomorrah so that I can go be their leader, right? There's a ready-made nation that I can go be the boss of, be the father of. But that is not what Abram did. This was the peace that the Lord revealed to me as I was talking with my friend, and it just instantaneously made so much sense that here all this time that my assignment, yes, is to rescue a generation. Absolutely. It's something that the Lord gave me. But how it looks is going to be what the Lord wants it to be. Because of course we know here with hindsight as our guide that Abram did ultimately become the father of many nations. We would probably prefer that he had fathered fewer nations. Life would be a little bit easier in the Middle East. Abraham had ended up fathering some fewer nations out of Isaac. But nevertheless, in Abram to Abraham's life, that never looked like he was the father of even a nation, right? And so God knows what he's doing. He doesn't need our help to make things happen. And that for me has been really freeing. Because the striving and the pushing and the struggle and the stress has been, I don't even know that I have words, but it's life altering. It has been a lot over these last years. And all for nothing, because that wasn't the point in the first place. I'm still just, or at least up until recently, I have still just been creating these Ishmaels that the Lord allowed because I needed to learn from them, but they still weren't his highest and best for me. And so in all of that, that's what I wanted to talk about today is as you're struggling through or as you're watching others struggle, first things first, trust the Lord. Period, full stop. I have a friend that says full stop. She's Scottish. So she has a fantastic accent. Trust that the Lord has a reason. And trust that the reason is not that you're just bad at marketing, or you're bad at being the boss, not found favor, or you're full of sin, or whatever. Some of that might be true. If the Lord called you, then he will equip you. As long as you're listening and as long as you're willing. The greatest thing that we can do is to walk in the humility that says, Lord, please show me. Show me the truth about myself. Show me the truth about this ministry. Show me what you want me to do so that I can go and do that. And when we can get to that place with the Lord, that's when he can really shine. That's when he can really accomplish a lot through us. And we can be so relieved, so at peace. And so hopefully this has been an encouragement for you. Hopefully you're not struggling with funding issues in light of the government shutdown or because of the tariffs, some of the other things that have been going on this year. I know that they're all good, but I mean, even good things, there are growing pains and challenges. And so I just want to encourage you about all of that, because I feel it's really easy for us to fall into the traps of striving. Of course, this ministry has to be larger today than it was yesterday. Of course, our goals next year have to be to serve more people or to do more things. But that's not necessarily the case. And that's not necessarily the actual assignment. So getting back to the actual assignment, getting back to the people that are supposed to be helping you run this race with endurance, getting back to the place where you are deeply rooted in Christ, and so therefore nothing else can shake you. The winds will come, the storms will come because they have to. That's part of natural cycle. But they're going to blow, they're going to buffet, they're going to rage around you. But your roots are deep, and so you will not be moved. You might be shaken, but you will not be moved. And so hopefully that's been an encouragement for you today, because it certainly has been an encouragement for me. I love you guys. Have a great week, and I will see you again next week. Thank you for joining me on the Rescue, Rebuild, Restore podcast. I pray this episode has equipped you to serve with greater clarity and compassion. If you're ready to go deeper, grab a copy of Rescue, Rebuild, Restore, Compassion That Works on either Amazon or at rescuerebuildrestore.com. And while you're there, you can also join our Rescue, Rebuild, Restore Compassion Collective.